The great station floated at the center of the galaxy like a jewel made of light and metal. It spun slowly against the endless black of space, and inside its walls, the rulers of 1,000 worlds gathered to witness history. The celestial Concord had stood for 80,000 years. 12 species, ancient beyond human understanding, had built an empire that stretched across stars without number. They called themselves the Enlightened Ones. They believed they had earned the right to rule. Today they would meet the children of the galaxy. Today they would meet humanity. Admiral stood at the entrance to the grand chamber and felt the weight of 8 billion souls pressing down on her shoulders. She was 53 years old, her hair gray at the temples, her eyes dark and sharp like polished stone. Behind her stood Ambassador Wei and 6 other humans. They were the smallest delegation the chamber had ever seen. The doors opened, and stepped forward into a room that made her feel like an ant walking into a cathedral. The grand chamber rose hundreds of meters above her head. Floating platforms held the representatives of the 12 ruling species, each one stranger than the last. They were tall and thin, their bodies wrapped in robes that seemed to flow like water. There were massive creatures covered in armored plates, their 4 eyes glowing with cold intelligence. They existed as clouds of light, shifting and pulsing with colors that had no names in human language. And there were others, so many others, all of them looking down at the tiny humans below. At the highest platform sat Archon of the. He was 9,000 years old. He had watched empires rise and fall like waves on a beach. He had seen 100 species kneel before the conquered and accept their place in the great order of things. He looked at the humans and saw nothing special, just another young race that had stumbled into the stars too early. "Welcome, children of Earth," said. His voice filled the chamber without effort, smooth and ancient like wind through dead trees. "You stand before the conquered of 12. We have watched your species for 300 years. We have studied your ways, and we have reached our decision." Said nothing. She stood with her hands clasped behind her back and her spine straight as steel. "Humanity is to be elevated," continued. "You will be granted membership in the conquered. You will receive access to our trade networks, our technology, our protection. The galaxy will open before you like a flower." Murmurs of approval rippled through the chamber. The other species nodded their heads or made sounds of agreement. This was how it was done. This was how it had always been done. "In exchange," said, "you will surrender your military vessels to conquered control. You will accept limits on your population growth. You will allow conquered advisors to guide your expansion into new territories. These terms are generous. These terms are fair." He spread his long arms wide. "What say you, children of Earth? Will you accept our gift?" For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence in the chamber grew thick and heavy. Then Ambassador stepped forward. He was a small man, thin and soft-spoken, with kind eyes that hid a mind sharper than any blade. He bowed his head respectfully before looking up at the ancient Archon. "We thank the conquered for this generous offer," said. His voice was quiet but clear. "Before we give our answer, I have one question." Tilted his head. In 80,000 years, no species had ever asked questions. They had simply wept with joy and accepted. "Speak," he said. "What of Elysium 7? The words fell into the chamber like stones dropped into still water. Watched the faces of the conquered rulers and saw something change in their eyes. The representative shifted on his platform. The around went very still. "Elysium 7, repeated slowly. "An unfortunate situation, a regrettable necessity." 4 million humans died, said. His voice remained calm, but there was something underneath it now. Something cold. Men, women, children, they died screaming as a plague ate them from the inside. A plague created by a plague deployed with conquered knowledge. "The humans of Elysium 7 were warned," the representative growled. "His name was, and he was a creature of war built for violence. They refused to leave sacred ground. They chose their fate. They chose to stay in their homes, replied. Homes they had built with their own hands. Homes where they raised their children and buried their dead, and you killed them for it. His 4 eyes narrowed. Watch your tongue, little creature, you speak to your betters. We asked for negotiation, continued, as if had not spoken. We asked for time. We asked for compromise. The conquered us without hearing our words, and when we refused to abandon our people, you murdered them. Raised a hand. The past is the past, ambassador. The conquered has made its ruling. Elysium 7 was unfortunate, but it is done. What matters now is the future, a future where humanity takes its place among the stars under our guidance. Looked up at the ancient being. For a moment, their eyes met across the vast distance of the chamber. You speak of guidance, said, but I see chains. You speak of protection, but I remember the screams of 4 million voices crying out for help that never came. You speak of the future, but you have not answered for the past. He turned and walked back to stand beside Admiral. The chamber was silent. Every eye, every sensor, every consciousness focused on the tiny group of humans standing on the floor below. Stepped forward. Her boots echoed on the metal floor like heartbeats. The conquered offers us membership, she said. Her voice was strong and clear. You offer us trade and technology and protection. In exchange, you ask us to give up our ships, our freedom, our right to grow as we choose. She looked around the chamber at the ancient faces staring down at her. You ask us to trust you, to believe that you will protect us as you protected the people of Elysium 7, to have faith that the same rulers who watched 4 million humans die will somehow keep us safe. Leaned forward. Admiral, I advise you to choose your next words carefully. The conquered has been patient with humanity. That patience has limits. Smiled. It was not a warm smile. Then let me be clear, she said. Humanity has come here today not to kneel, not to beg for scraps from your table, not to accept chains wrapped in pretty words. She straightened to her full height. We came here to deliver a message. The people of Elysium 7 are dead. 4 million souls who trusted that the galaxy had laws. 4 million souls who believed that even among the stars there was justice. Her voice hardened. They were wrong. There is no justice here. There is only power, and the conquered has made it clear that human lives mean nothing to you. She turned to face directly. So here is our answer to your generous offer. We respectfully decline. The words struck the chamber like lightning. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. In 80,000 years, no species had ever refused elevation. No species had ever said no. Stared at the human woman standing far below him. She was nothing. A speck. A creature whose entire species had existed for less time than he had been alive. And yet she stood there without fear, without doubt, and told the rulers of the galaxy that their gift was not wanted. You refuse, he said. His voice was soft with disbelief. You understand what this means. Without conquered protection, humanity stands alone. Without our trade networks, your economy will suffer. Without our guidance, you will make enemies you cannot defeat. Held his gaze. We have already made enemies we cannot defeat, she said. You made that clear at Elysium 7. The only difference now is that we know who they are. She turned and walked toward the door. The other humans followed. At the threshold, she paused and looked back one final time. The conquered had a chance to welcome humanity as partners, as equals. Instead, you showed us what you truly are. Rulers who believe that power makes you right. Masters who think that age makes you wise. Her eyes found in the heights above. You have made a mistake today. One day, you will understand how great a mistake it was. Then she walked out, and the doors closed behind her, and the conquered was left in silence. Sat on his platform and watched the empty floor where the humans had stood. Around him, the other rulers began to speak in worried voices. Some were angry, some were confused, Some were already calling for punishment. But deep in his ancient mind, in a place he had almost forgotten existed, felt something stir, a cold whisper, a shadow of doubt. He told himself it was nothing. Humanity was young. Humanity was weak. They would learn their place in time. They all did. He told himself this and almost believed it. Almost. 18 months before the humans stood in the grand chamber, there was a world called Elysium 7. It was a beautiful world. Blue oceans stretched across its surface like sheets of silk. Green forests covered its continents, filled with strange trees that sang when the wind blew through their leaves. 2 moons hung in its sky, one silver and one gold, and at night they painted the clouds in colors that made children stop and stare. 4 million humans called this world home. They had come from Earth 60 years ago, crossing the vast emptiness of space in great ships that carried their hopes and dreams. They had landed on Elysium 7 and found a paradise waiting for them. They built cities and farms. They raised families. They created a new branch of humanity among the stars. Maya Torres was 7 years old when they came. She lived in a small town called New Helsinki, near the northern mountains where the trees grew tallest. Her father was a farmer who grew vegetables in fields of dark soil. Her mother was a teacher who showed children how to read. Maya had a little brother named Carlos who was only 4, and a dog named Patches who had 1 brown ear and 1 white ear. It was a simple life, a good life. Then the ships appeared in the sky. Maya remembered standing in her backyard and looking up at the strange lights that moved between the stars. Her father came out and stood beside her, his big, rough hand resting on her shoulder. "What are those, Papa?" she asked. Her father did not answer for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with something Maya did not understand. "Trouble," he said. "That's trouble, little one." The claim that Elysium 7 sat on sacred ground. Thousands of years ago, they said, their ancestors had died here in a great war. The bones of heroes lay buried beneath the soil that humans now farmed. The presence of aliens on this holy world was an insult that could not be allowed. The conquered heard the complaint. They did not ask humans to speak. They did not send anyone to investigate. They simply ruled that humanity must leave Elysium 7 within 1 standard year. 4 million people, 60 years of building and growing and living, 1 year to abandon everything. Earth's government tried to negotiate. They offered to share the world. They offered to protect any burial sites they could identify. They offered money, technology, anything they wanted. They begged for more time, for compromise, for reason. The conquered refused, the deadline stood. And when the year ended, and the humans of Elysium 7 still had not left their homes, they made good on their threats. They called it the cleansing. The weapon was a plague, designed in laboratories to attack only human cells. It spread through the air like invisible fire. Within days, every human on Elysium 7 was infected. Maya remembered the day her father got sick. He came in from the fields with blood dripping from his nose. His skin was pale and gray like old paper. He tried to smile at her, tried to tell her everything would be okay, but she saw the fear in his eyes. By the next morning, he could not get out of bed. The plague worked slowly. That was the cruelty of it. People did not die quickly. They suffered. They screamed as their organs failed one by one. They begged for help that never came, for medicine that did not exist, for mercy that they did not possess. Maya's mother lasted 2 weeks. She held her children close until the very end, whispering that she loved them, that she was sorry, that she wished she could protect them. Then she was gone. Maya and Carlos hid in the basement of their house while the world died above them. They drank water from bottles and ate food from cans. They listened to the sounds outside, the crying and the screaming, and then, worst of all, the silence. The silence lasted for days. When Maya finally climbed out, the town was empty. Bodies lay in the streets. Birds circled in the sky. The singing trees still sang, but there was no one left to hear them. She was 7 years old, her brother was 4, and they were alone. They were found 3 weeks later by a rescue shuttle that had slipped through the blockade. The pilot, a woman named Sarah, had volunteered for a suicide mission to save whoever might still be alive. She found 2 children in a farmhouse basement, surrounded by empty cans and dry bottles. Maya was holding her brother's hand. She had not let go for days. Sarah loaded them onto her shuttle and flew them off that dying world. Behind them, ships moved in to sterilize the planet, burning away every trace of human presence with fire and radiation. Maya watched through the shuttle window as Elysium 7 disappeared behind her. The blue oceans and green forests faded to black and gray. The singing trees burned. The houses where children had grown up became ash. 4 million people gone. And the galaxy did nothing. Sarah recorded everything. She captured footage of the bodies in the streets, the children dying in hospitals without medicine, the ships raining fire on evacuating shuttles. She sent the recordings to Earth before her shuttle was intercepted by fighters. She died making sure the truth got out. On Earth, 8 billion people watched the footage. They saw Maya's town burning. They heard the screams of the dying. They witnessed the cold efficiency of as they murdered millions without remorse. Something changed in humanity that day. Something ancient and terrible woke up in the collective soul of the species. For 300 years, humans had tried to be good neighbors in the galaxy. They had followed the rules. They had been polite. They had believed that if they were just kind enough, just patient enough, the older species would eventually accept them. Now they understood the truth. The galaxy did not want kind neighbors. The galaxy wanted obedient servants. And when servants refused to obey, they were destroyed. The United Earth Council met in emergency session 3 days after the footage arrived. The meeting was held in secret, deep underground, away from any eyes that might be watching. President stood before the assembled leaders of Earth. He was a tall man with a soldier's bearing and a politician's careful words. But today, there was nothing careful in his voice. "We have tried peace," he said. "We have tried diplomacy. We have tried reason and compromise and begging. The conquered has answered with genocide." He looked around the room at faces filled with grief and rage. "The question before us is not whether to respond. The question is how." Admiral rose from her seat. She had commanded Earth's defense fleet for 15 years. She had always counseled caution, always urged patience, always believed that war could be avoided. That woman was gone. In her place stood something harder, something forged in the fire of 4 million deaths. "For 300 years we have hidden our true strength," she said. "We let the conquered believe we were weak. We let them think we were harmless. We did this because we hoped we would never need to fight." Her hands curled into fists at her sides. "That hope died on Elysium 7. The conquered has shown us who they really are. Now we will show them who we really are." She activated a holographic display. Images filled the air above the table. Ships, weapons, installations hidden in the darkness between stars. Project Prometheus, Project Nemesis, Project. For 300 years we have prepared for the day when peace was no longer possible. That day has come. The council members stared at the images with wide eyes. They had known about the secret programs. They had approved the funding, signed the orders, kept the secrets. But seeing it all laid out before them was something else entirely. Humanity had built an army in the shadows, a fleet that dwarfed anything the conquered believed they possessed, weapons that broke the rules of physics as the galaxy understood them, technology that would make the ancient species tremble. "The killed 4 million of our people," said. "The conquered allowed it. They expect us to grieve, to rage for a while, and then to submit. That is what every other species has done." Her eyes blazed with cold fire. "We are not every other species. We are humanity, and we do not submit. President nodded slowly. Then it's decided, he said. We go to the conquered one more time. We give them a chance to make this right, and if they refuse... He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Far away, on a memorial station built in orbit around the burned husk of Elysium 7, a small girl named Maya Torres stood before a wall covered with names. 4 million names, carved into white stone that would last forever. She found her parents' names near the middle. She found her dog's name at the bottom, where someone had added the pets and animals who had died alongside their owners. She was 8 years old now. She had been adopted by Sarah's sister. She had a new home, a new family, people who loved her and cared for her. But she would never forget. She would never forgive. I'm sorry, she whispered to the names on the wall. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. I'm sorry the world is so unfair. Tears rolled down her cheeks. But I promise you this. Someone will answer for what happened. Someone will pay. They will learn that human lives are not worthless. The conquered will learn that we are not children to be ignored. She pressed her small hand against the cold stone. Justice is coming. I don't know when, I don't know how, but it's coming. And far away on Earth, Admiral received her orders. Justice was coming indeed. 1 year passed after humanity refused the conquered's offer. In the Grand Chamber, the rulers of the galaxy spoke of the humans with amused contempt. They called them foolish children. They said humanity would soon come crawling back, begging for the protection they had rejected. Every species went through this phase, they said. Anger, denial, grief, then acceptance. It was only a matter of time. Archon listened to these conversations and said nothing. Sometimes, late at night when the station was quiet, he found himself thinking about the human woman who had stood before him without fear. He remembered her eyes, dark and hard as stone. He remembered her words. You have made a mistake today. He pushed the thought away. Humanity was nothing, a young species with a small fleet and limited technology. They had no allies, no experience, no understanding of how the galaxy truly worked. Their defiance was meaningless. And yet the thought kept coming back. Far from the Grand Chamber in the cold darkness of the cloud, humanity was not grieving. They were preparing. Admiral stood on the bridge of the battleship Prometheus and looked out at the fleet assembling around her. Ships hung in the void like sleeping giants, their hulls dark against the distant stars. There were thousands of them. Battleships, carriers, destroyers, support vessels. More ships than the conquered believed humanity possessed. This was Project Prometheus. For 300 years, humanity had built in secret. They had hidden shipyards in asteroid fields. They had constructed factories in the spaces between stars. They had developed technology that the conquered had never seen, weapons that broke rules the ancient species thought were unbreakable. The conquered believed humanity had 200 warships. They were wrong by a factor of 10. Status report said. Commander James Wright stood beside her, a tablet in his hands. He was young for his rank, only 35, but he had the eyes of a much older man. The eyes of someone who had lost people on Elysium 7. Fleet readiness at 92%, he said. All Prometheus-class vessels are operational. The Nemesis weapons are loaded and ready. We can move on your order. Nodded slowly, and the units. Standing by, they understand their mission. The units, volunteers, all of them, men and women who had agreed to do the unthinkable if it became necessary, hoped she would never need to use them, but she had learned long ago that hope was not a strategy. The conquered still doesn't know, she said. It was not a question. No, Admiral. Our intelligence networks report that their assessment of human military capability remains unchanged. They believe we are weak. They believe we are scared. Smiled grimly. Good, let them believe. In a different part of the galaxy, Ambassador Wei prepared for his final mission. He sat in a small room on a transport ship, reviewing his notes for the 100th time. He knew every word by heart. He had practiced every gesture, every pause, every tone of voice. What he was about to do would either save millions of lives or doom them. The Conquered had agreed to meet with him one last time. They expected him to surrender. They expected him to apologize for humanity's defiance and accept whatever terms they chose to offer. They were going to be disappointed. Looked at a photograph on his desk. It showed a young woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. His daughter. She had been a doctor on Elysium 7. She had stayed behind when the evacuation began, refusing to leave her patients. She had died holding the hand of an old man who had no family left. Touched the photograph gently. "I'll make this right," he whispered. "I promise." 3 days later, he stood before the Conquered once more. The grand chamber was the same as before. The same floating platforms, the same ancient faces looking down with contempt, the same Archon watching from his high seat. But something had changed, could feel it in the air. There was tension now, uncertainty. The rulers of the galaxy had expected humanity to break by now. They had expected surrender. Instead, they got silence. For 1 year, humanity had said nothing, done nothing. They had simply vanished from galactic affairs like ghosts, and that silence was more frightening than any threat could have been. Ambassador said, "You have requested this audience. The Conquered has graciously agreed to hear you. Speak." Bowed his head respectfully. When he raised it, his eyes were calm and clear. "Honored Archon, rulers of the Conquered, I come before you today with an offer." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. An offer. The humans dared to make offers. 18 months ago, the hegemony murdered 4 million human citizens. They used biological weapons against a civilian population. They killed men, women, and children without mercy or remorse. He paused, letting the words sink in. The Conquered knew this would happen. The Conquered did nothing to stop it. The Conquered has made no effort to punish thee or provide justice to the dead. The representative growled from his platform. Your people were given fair warning. They chose defiance. They faced the consequences. Looked up at him. 4 million consequences, including infants, including the elderly, including the sick and the helpless. Tell me, representative, how many children did we murder? You dare. I dare nothing. I simply ask a question. How many children? How many hospitals did we bomb? How many cities did we burn? Silence. None, said softly. The answer is none. Humanity has never harmed a single civilian. We have never used weapons against your people. We have only ever asked to be left in peace. He turned to face. So here is our offer, Archon. A final offer. Accept it and there will be no war. Refuse it and face the consequences. Leaned forward. You threaten the Conquered. I offer the Conquered a chance to avoid disaster, nothing more. Speak your terms then, let us hear this offer. Took a deep breath. First, the leaders responsible for the Elysium 7 genocide will be surrendered to human custody. They will face trial for their crimes. Justice will be served. Laughed a harsh barking sound. You expect us to hand over our leaders, to you, a species barely out of its cradle. Second, continued, ignoring the interruption, the Conquered will pay reparations to the families of the dead. The amount will be determined by a neutral party. Absurd, someone muttered from the platforms above. Third, the Conquered will accept human observers in all military operations. No action will be taken against any species without human approval. Now the chamber erupted. Voices shouted in a dozen languages. The ancient rulers of the galaxy screamed their outrage at the tiny human standing below them. Raised his hand and silence fell. You ask us to submit to human oversight, he said slowly. You ask us to surrender our sovereignty to a species that has existed for the blink of an eye. You ask us to bow before creatures we could crush without effort. He leaned back in his seat. Ambassador, I have lived for 9,000 years. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched species far mightier than yours try to challenge the conquered. Do you know what happened to them? I know what happened to them, replied. They were destroyed. Their worlds were burned. Their people were scattered. The conquered has never shown mercy to those who defy it. And yet you come here making demands. Why? Smiled. It was a sad smile, filled with grief and resignation and something else, something that made uneasy. Because we have nothing left to lose, Archon. You took everything from us at Elysium 7, our hope, our trust, our faith that the galaxy could be fair. All we have left is the will to fight. You cannot win, said. Your fleet is small, your technology is primitive, you have no allies. If you challenge the conquered, you will be destroyed. Looked at him for a long moment. You believe that because you have never truly seen what humanity can do. You have read reports about us. You have studied our history, but you have not understood it. He turned and began walking toward the door. You see a young species, weak and foolish. You see children who need to be taught their place, but you have missed something important, Archon, something that will cost you everything. He paused at the threshold. We are not afraid to die. We are not afraid of pain. We are not afraid of you, and we have spent 300 years preparing for this moment. Felt that cold whisper again, the shadow of doubt that had haunted him since the first meeting. What have you done? He asked. Smiled. I have given you one last chance to choose peace. You have refused. What happens next is on your conscience, not mine. He walked out. 3 days later, across human space, 4 million candles were lit, one for each soul lost on Elysium 7. Families gathered in parks and churches and homes. They held hands and remembered the dead. Then, as midnight struck in every time zone, the candles went out. And in the darkness, humanity's hidden fleet began to move. The silence was over. The thunder was coming. The hegemony fell in 11 days. No one in the galaxy had expected it. There were warriors, bred for battle across 10,000 generations. Their fleet was vast. Their weapons were feared. They had crushed rebellions and conquered worlds since before humanity had discovered fire. None of it mattered. The humans came out of nowhere. Their ships appeared from directions that should have been empty, using drives that did not rely on the conquered's gate network. They moved faster than sensors could track. They struck targets that should have been impossible to find. On the first day, the human fleet destroyed every military station in 3 systems. They did not fight fair battles. They did not announce themselves. They simply appeared, fired, and vanished before they could respond. On the third day, the home fleet mobilized. 800 warships, the pride of the hegemony, gathered to crush the human invaders. They found nothing. The humans were gone. Then, while the fleet searched empty space, human strike teams landed on military installations across the sector. They captured armories, disabled communication arrays, and disappeared into the shadows before reinforcements could arrive. They did not know how to fight an enemy they could not see. On the 7th day, the human fleet reappeared above Prime itself, stood on the bridge of his flagship and stared at the enemy ships filling his. There were hundreds of them. Hundreds. The conquered's intelligence had claimed humanity possessed only 200 warships total. Now there were more than that in orbit around his. How, he whispered, how is this possible? No one answered him. The humans did not bombard Prime. They did not drop bombs on cities or release plagues to kill civilians. Instead, they broadcast a single message to every screen on the planet. Admiral's face appeared, calm and cold. People of the hegemony, she said. Your leaders murdered 4 million innocent humans on Elysium 7. They used weapons of mass destruction against civilians. They killed children in their beds and doctors in their hospitals. Her eyes seemed to look directly at each viewer. We did not come here for revenge. We came for justice. Surrender your military leaders. Turn over those responsible for the genocide. Do this and no civilian will be harmed. Refuse and we will take them by force. Ordered his fleet to attack. It was a mistake. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, 3/4 of the fleet was destroyed. The survivors fled into deep space, scattered and broken. Human Marines landed on Prime the next morning. They moved through the capital city in perfect formation, their weapons ready but not firing. Civilians watched them pass in stunned silence. No one had ever invaded there. No one had ever dared. Was captured in his command bunker, surrounded by guards who surrendered without a fight. He looked at the human soldiers pointing weapons at him and felt something he had never felt before. Fear. When news of the defeat reached the conquered, panic spread through the grand chamber. The ancient rulers demanded explanations. How had humanity built such a fleet? How had they developed such technology? How had they moved through space without using the gate network? There were no answers, only questions and the growing terror that came with them. Called an emergency session, representatives from all 12 conquered species gathered to discuss the human threat. For the first time in thousands of years, the rulers of the galaxy did not speak with confidence. They spoke with fear. We must unite our forces, the representative said, their light pulsing with agitation. Together, our combined fleets will overwhelm the humans. They cannot stand against all of us. They could not stand against them alone, another voice argued. What makes you think we can do better together? Because we have numbers, we have experience. We have ruled this galaxy for 80,000 years. Listened to the arguments and felt the weight of ages pressing down on him. He had been wrong about the humans. So terribly, completely wrong. But it was too late to change course now. The conquered could not show weakness, could not admit error, could not surrender to a species that should have been nothing more than servants. We will mobilize the combined fleet, he announced. Every species will contribute their forces. We will find the human fleet and destroy it. This rebellion ends now. The combined fleet was the largest military force in galactic history. 3,000 warships from 12 species, each one representing the best their civilization had to offer. They gathered at Ring, a strategic point between conquered space and human territory. The human fleet came to meet them. 400 ships against 3,000. It should have been a slaughter. It was, just not the way the conquered expected. The humans did not fight like any enemy the conquered had ever faced. They did not form battle lines. They did not exchange fire at range. Instead, they drove straight into the heart of the combined fleet like a spear thrown into the chest of a giant. Conquered commanders watched in disbelief as human ships weaved between their formations, too fast and too unpredictable to target. The massive conquered vessels, designed for ordered combat against predictable enemies, could not adjust quickly enough. Then the humans did something no species had ever done before. They began detonating their own ships. It was a tactic born of desperation and courage. Human crews would drive their vessels into the center of conquered formations, then trigger their reactor cores. The explosions were enormous, destroying everything within thousands of kilometers. The crews knew they would die. They did it anyway. One ship, then another, then a dozen. Human captains gave their lives to tear holes in the conquered formation. Human crews chose death rather than defeat. Human soldiers proved that they were willing to sacrifice everything for victory. The conquered fleet had never faced an enemy like this. They had never imagined that anyone would fight this way. Their formations shattered. Their commanders panicked. Their ships began to retreat without orders. By the end of the battle, half the combined fleet was destroyed. The rest fled in chaos, each species blaming the others for the disaster. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Prometheus and watched the conquered ships scatter into the void. Her face was expressionless, but tears streamed down her cheeks. "How many?" she asked quietly. Commander Wright checked his tablet. His voice was rough. 47 ships lost, 12,000 crew members. 12,000 lives. 12,000 men and women who had volunteered to die for their species. Closed her eyes for a moment. "Record their names," she said. "Every one of them, they will not be forgotten." "Yes, Admiral." She opened her eyes and looked at the tactical display. The combined fleet was broken. They were defeated. The path to the Celestial Concord was open. "Set course for the Grand Chamber," she ordered. "It's time to end this." One by one, the conquered species began to surrender. They were first, broadcasting their capitulation before the human fleet even entered their space. The others followed quickly. They had seen what happened to those who resisted. They wanted no part of it. Within 3 months, only the remained defiant, refused all offers of negotiation. He had ruled the galaxy for 9,000 years. He would not bow to insects. But his people had other ideas. The council removed from power in a bloodless coup. They sent ambassadors to the humans begging for peace. They offered to surrender. They offered anything. Admiral's response was simple. Bring us everyone responsible for Elysium 7, then we will discuss peace." The human fleet appeared above the Celestial Concord station on a cold morning in the galactic calendar. 1,000 ships surrounded the ancient structure, their weapons trained on every door and window. Stood in the Grand Chamber, alone. The other Archons had fled or surrendered. The platforms that once held the rulers of the galaxy were empty. Only he remained, staring out at the ships that had come to claim him. He was 9,000 years old. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had believed himself immortal, untouchable, beyond the reach of lesser beings. Now he understood the truth. He was not a god. He was not even a king. He was just an old man who had made a terrible mistake and would soon face the consequences. The doors opened, and Admiral walked in. She was alone. No guards, no weapons visible, just a woman in a uniform walking toward him across the empty floor. "Archon," she said, "by the authority of the United Earth Council, you are under arrest for crimes against humanity. You will be taken to Earth to stand trial. You will answer for the deaths of 4 million innocent people." Looked at her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "You have won," he said finally. "The Concord is broken. The galaxy is yours. What will you do with it? Will you become what we were? Will you rule through fear and power?" Shook her head. "That's not why we fought. We didn't come here to conquer. We came here for justice, nothing more." "Justice," repeated. Such a human word, so simple, so naive. "Perhaps, but it's what we believe in. It's what 4 million people died believing in." She gestured toward the door. "Come, Archon, your trial awaits." Walked past her, his ancient robes dragging on the floor. At the threshold, he paused and looked back at the empty chamber where he had ruled for. "I underestimated you," he said quietly. "I thought you were children. I thought you would break." Stood beside him. "Everyone makes that mistake," she said. "They see our kindness and think we are weak. They see our hope and think we are foolish. They push us and push us, thinking we will never push back." Her voice hardened. "They are always wrong." She walked him out of the Grand Chamber, and the doors closed behind them, and an era ended in silence. 6 months after the war ended, the galaxy gathered to witness justice. The Terran Tribunal was held in a great hall built on the surface of Mars. Humanity had chosen the red planet deliberately. It was neutral ground, a world that belonged to no nation and no faction. It was also a symbol of what humanity could do when they set their minds to something. They had turned a dead world into a garden. They could rebuild a broken galaxy just as easily. Representatives from every species came to watch. They sat in tiered galleries that rose toward the ceiling, thousands of eyes fixed on the stage below. Some came out of curiosity, some came out of fear. Some came hopping to see the humans reveal themselves as monsters, as conquerors no different from the conquered. They were all disappointed. The trials were fair. Every defendant received a translator, a legal advocate, and the chance to speak in their own defense. Every piece of evidence was examined carefully. Every accusation was proven beyond doubt before judgment was passed. It took 3 months to try everyone responsible for Elysium 7, military commanders, political leaders, scientists who had designed the plague, officers who had ordered the ships to fire on evacuating shuttles. 147 defendants, 147 judgments. Was among the first to face the tribunal. He stood before the judges, still proud, still defiant. He had killed millions. He felt no shame. "I did what was necessary," he said. "The humans were vermin infesting sacred ground. I removed them. Any in my position would have done the same." The lead judge, a human woman named, looked at him with sad eyes. "You speak of sacred ground," she said. "Your people claimed that ancestors were buried on Elysium 7. That was the justification for your demand that humans leave." "Yes. Our archaeologists have examined every square meter of that world. They found no burial sites, no remains, nothing to support your claim." "Said nothing." "You murdered 4 million people for a lie," continued. "A lie you created to justify taking a world you wanted. You did not care about sacred ground. You cared about power, about teaching humanity their place. They needed to learn. They needed to live." The judge's voice cracked like a whip. "Children needed to grow up. Parents needed to watch them grow. 4 million people needed the chance to love and laugh and dream and die of old age surrounded by their families." She leaned forward. "You took that from them, not for justice, not for protection, not for sacred duty. You took it because you could, because no one had ever stopped you before." The verdict was guilty. The sentence was exile. Was stripped of his technology, his weapons, his armor. He was placed on a barren moon at the edge of the galaxy, along with the other convicted war criminals. They were given seeds and tools and basic supplies. They were told to build a new society or die trying. "This is your punishment," Judge told them. "You believed that power gave you the right to destroy. Now you have no power. You must create or perish. Perhaps in time you will understand what you took from us." Some of the condemned screamed their outrage. Others wept. Some simply stood in silence, finally understanding the weight of what they had done. The galaxy watched and learned. Was the last to face judgment. He walked into the tribunal with the slow dignity of extreme age. His robes were simple now, his crown gone, his power broken. He was just an old man waiting to hear his fate. Ambassador stood as the prosecutor. He had requested the assignment personally. His daughter had died on Elysium 7. He had earned the right to speak for the dead. "Archon," he began, "you ruled the conquered for 9,000 years. In that time, you oversaw the destruction of 17 species. You ordered the sterilization of 42 worlds. You created a system where the strong could murder the weak without consequence. Listened without expression. You did not personally design the plague that killed our people. You did not personally give the order to release it, but you created the conditions that made Elysium 7 possible. You built a galaxy where genocide was acceptable policy." Stepped closer. 4 million humans died because of you. Not directly, not with your hands, but because of the system you created and defended for. Because you taught them that they could do whatever they wanted to lesser species. Because you told them there would be no consequences. He paused. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was tired and old. "I believed I was building order. The galaxy is vast and dangerous. Without guidance, species destroy themselves and each other. The conquered brought peace. We ended wars. We prevented extinction. We created a system that lasted 80,000 years. A system built on fear, said. A system where obedience was purchased with the threat of annihilation. Yes, because fear works. Because strength is the only language the universe understands. Looked at the human standing before him. You proved that yourself, did you not? You did not defeat us with kindness or reason. You defeated us with ships and weapons and soldiers willing to die. You proved that I was right all along. Shook his head. We proved that we could destroy you. We chose not to. We have the power to exterminate every species that stood against us. We have not. We have the ability to rule through fear exactly as you did. We refuse. He gestured at the chamber around them. This is what separates us from you. Not power, not technology, not will, justice, mercy, the belief that even our enemies deserve fair treatment, the understanding that vengeance alone is not enough. The verdict was guilty, but the sentence was not exile. Archon, judge announced, you are sentenced to live. You will be confined to a comfortable facility on Earth where you will receive care appropriate to your age and condition. You will be required to witness the new order we build. You will see the galaxy learn to live without masters. You will watch species grow and thrive without your guidance. Stared at her in disbelief. You spare me, why? Because you want to die, replied. You want us to execute you, to prove that we are no better than you were. You want to go to your grave believing that your way was the only way. She leaned forward. We will not give you that comfort. You will live, you will watch, and perhaps someday you will understand why you were wrong. Was led away in chains, broken in ways that execution could never achieve. The trials ended, the guilty were punished, justice was served. But the work was only beginning. Humanity did not claim the throne the conquered had left empty. They did not declare themselves rulers of the galaxy. Instead, they called a meeting of every species, large and small, powerful and weak. In the same grand chamber where they had been dismissed as children, the humans proposed a new order. A federation where every species had a voice, where military action required consensus, where no world could be attacked without cause and trial, where even the smallest and youngest civilization had rights that could not be ignored. The old powers resisted at first. They had ruled for so long, they did not know how to be equals. But they learned, slowly, painfully they learned. 5 years after the war, Maya Torres stood on the surface of New Elysium. She was 13 years old now, tall for her age, with her mother's dark hair and her father's quiet strength. She had come with a school group to see the memorial that had been built on this world. New Elysium was not the same as the old. It was a different planet in a different system, but it had been named to honor the dead, and it had been planted with seeds from the old Elysium, carried away by survivors before the end. The singing trees had grown here. Maya could hear them now, their voices rising and falling with the wind. It was a sound she remembered from childhood, a sound she had thought she would never hear again. The memorial stood at the center of a great garden, 4 million names carved into white stone that would last forever. Families came from across the galaxy to see it. Humans, aliens, even some, the young ones who had been children when the war began. Maya walked along the wall until she found her parents' names. She touched the stone gently, feeling the grooves of the letters beneath her fingers. Hi Mama, hi Papa. She had brought flowers from Earth, real flowers grown in a garden she tended herself. She placed them at the base of the wall. I wanted to tell you that I'm okay. I'm doing well in school. I have friends. I have people who love me. She wiped her eyes. The war is over. The people who hurt you are being punished. Not killed because we're better than that, but punished. They'll never hurt anyone again. A shadow fell across the wall. Maya looked up. A child stood nearby, young and small, her armored plates still soft with youth. She was maybe 6 years old, hatched long after Elysium 7. She carried a flower in her clawed hands. She looked at Maya with uncertain eyes. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," the child said. Her voice was high and thin. "My teachers told us what happened, what our people did. I wanted to say I'm sorry." Maya studied her for a long moment. She thought about the hatred she had carried for so long. She thought about the nights she had dreamed of revenge, of watching cities burn the way New Helsinki had burned. Then she thought about her mother, about the lessons she had taught in her classroom about kindness and forgiveness and hope. She reached out and took the child's hand. "It's not your fault," Maya said. "You didn't do anything wrong." "But my people—" "Your people made terrible choices, but you're not them. You can be different. You can be better." The child looked at their joined hands with wonder. No human had ever touched her gently before. No human had ever spoken to her without anger. "How can you not hate me?" she asked. Maya thought about the question for a long time. "Because hate is what started this," she said finally. "Hate is what killed my parents and my friends and 4 million people who just wanted to live in peace. If I hate you, it continues. If I hurt you, it never ends." She squeezed the small clawed hand. "Someone has to stop the cycle. Someone has to choose something different. So I choose to forgive. Not because you earned it, not because it's easy, but because it's the only way forward." Together they walked to the wall. The child placed her flower beside Maya's. They stood in silence, two children from species that had tried to destroy each other, united by grief and hope and the chance for something better. Above them, the singing trees filled the air with music. Around them, humans and aliens walked together through the garden of remembrance. And somewhere in the stars, a new galaxy was being born. Not a galaxy of masters and servants, not a galaxy of fear and power, a galaxy of equals, building something the universe had never seen before. 4 million people had died for this moment. Their children would make sure it was worth it.